Episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion Show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook on at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video. Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show, and today I am here with Sam Wargin Grimaldo, who is a candidate for the Oklahoma City Council in Ward 4. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on here, Gregory.
Welcome. First question I have here is where are you from and where did you grow up at, and tell me a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, so I'm from South Oklahoma City. When I was born, my family was living in the Schuyler neighborhood over off Southeast 15th and Byers or Stiles, that area. And then when I was 5, my family moved to the Capitol Hill district, which is where I'm living now. I'm actually living in the house I grew up in, funny enough. I'm one of 5 kids, had a twin sister, and the biggest house we ever lived in was 3 bedrooms, so we were always crammed for space. Definitely part of the low income working class population in Oklahoma City. My mother's an immigrant from Mexico, and my father was a white guy from Chicago, so had that kind of multicultural background growing up. And yeah, I mean, I lived on the south side. Starting in middle school, I went to school on the north side at Classen SAS, which is kind of a specialty school, right? A magnet school you got to apply to. So had that experience of traversing the different areas of the city and quickly realizing, even at middle school age, the differences in how resources are distributed, public resources, right? So you see the difference in even just things like beautification efforts or medians, stuff like that, that I could see in the neighborhoods in North Oklahoma City that weren't here on South Oklahoma City. So I know you asked a lot of other things in the question, but I think that covers a little bit about my background, where I'm from.
All right. What all have you done since graduating from UCO?
Right on. So I graduated UCO with a sociology and human services degree, and straight out of UCO, I worked at the Latino Community Development Agency, which is a nonprofit located down in the Riverside neighborhood on South Walker. And I was co-coordinator of their youth programs there. So a lot of community, family and youth outreach. We'd go out into middle schools and run what we called Latino clubs, just trying to get kids involved and engaged with their schoolwork and life skills type lessons. And then I also ran like an after-school tutoring program, an after-school art program, and then a summer day camp. So always working with kids and their families. And then after that, I moved on to kind of like an education background. So I worked at UCO with their Gear Up program, a college prep program, where we worked with middle school students and walked them all the way through high school graduation and hopefully on to higher education. And after that, I left and worked for Oklahoma City Public Schools, first in an admin position in their Office of Language and Cultural Services, working with youth and families again, kind of helping families who had different language or cultural backgrounds, access resources and address issues within the public school system. And that was a really short stint. It was a 3-month position because Oklahoma was experiencing like massive budget cuts at the time. This was 2016. So I was there for 3 months, and pretty much like the week after I started, they told me that that job wasn't going to be there after the summer. So I started getting on the path to getting an emergency certification to teach high school at US Grant. And I did that for 3 years before I applied and enrolled in law school at OU. So in my second year doing that, And I think that covers the whole span since UCO.
All right. Um, so what made you want to run for the city council?
Well, I think I touched a little bit on this earlier, just kind of those, childhood, adolescent observations of the disparity between different sides of the city and where the public resources go. And it's still true. I think Oklahoma City's been doing a really great job in the last few years of allocating those resources a little bit more equitably, right? We're getting some attention. We're getting roads, we're getting bike lanes, and other private public partnerships that are really starting to take steps to improve the quality of life for residents all over the city. And I can only speak specifically to South Oklahoma City, which is what I experience on the day to day. But things are changing, and I'm happy to see that. But I also think there needs to be uh, further steps to go a little deeper than that, right? As great as those improvements are, they're very surface level. Like having bike lanes, yeah, that's great, right? And it's a wonderful step for a metropolitan city to take, especially one that's so car driven and car influences Oklahoma City. But what does that do for the day-to-day lives of people living paycheck to paycheck? It gives them a way to get to a place safely. If their only form of transportation is riding a bike, yeah, it gives them a way to get somewhere a little safely as long as they stick to those routes. But at a certain, from a certain perspective, those are surface level improvements. And I think we can go a little deeper. So my main motivations is really creating policy and directing funds to help build and support neighborhood connections, whether it's a neighborhood association, organization, or partnerships between public and private entities that help neighborhoods create a unified voice through which they can advocate for themselves and really direct the future direction of our city, right? I think that covers.
All right. In your platform on your website, you talk about gentrification and displacement. How are some ways you'd like to see OKC deal with this?
So I think the first thing we got to do is just acknowledge that those things are happening here. And, most people will quote the city as having gone through a renaissance in the last, 10 to 15 years. You maybe even stretch it back further, 20 years, especially, since the MAPS project started. So that's, mid-late 90s we're talking about now. And, it's brought wonderful development, wonderful economic opportunities for people looking to invest in Oklahoma City, whether you're already located here or you're looking at us from the outside and you're thinking, this is a place I want to put my money and investments in because it's on the rise. But the unfortunate side effect of a lot of development, especially when you're doing it in the inner city, right? If you're, a city like Oklahoma City, that a large part of the population that lived inside of the city and not in the suburbs was mostly lower middle class to lower class, working class, poor people living in inner city. Well, now it's attractive to put that public investment in South Oklahoma City, and that's necessary. But unfortunately, when we put that investment there, developers get priority, and the people who'd been living there, who'd built their communities, raised their families, sent their kids to school in that inner city communities, end up getting displaced, right? So what I've noticed, especially in South Oklahoma City, I'm sure other parts of the city can say this, I grew up down here and I made a lot of friends when I was at elementary school and we'd play down the streets. And we all, when we grew up, we left the South Side, right? Because it didn't seem like there was any economic or housing opportunity that was really worth our while. If you're going to buy a house, it makes sense to buy in a house in an area where your property is going to appreciate. So the consequence of that is that most of the houses, or a lot of the houses, I think, in South Oklahoma City, the inner city part of the south side of OKC, are rental properties, right? They're investor owned, that's great for people who are just temporarily living somewhere, but it has the effect of, creating a high turnover, lack of it, like personal investment in properties and neighborhood, right? So whether it's because the property owners are failing to put the adequate attention into their properties and upkeep and maintenance so that people feel comfortable living there and safe, or it's the fact that people are only living there 6 months to a year and they don't see the point in investing and taking care of the outside of their house or the safety of their neighborhood or relationships with their neighbors, right? So what I'd like to do to tackle gentrification and displacement is to, again, direct funds and create policy that makes it attractive for people in the inner city living here as renters to become homeowners. It makes it attractive or gives incentive to property owners who are just sitting on these properties, not taking good care of them, to, sell their homes. And whether it's creating a city-run program that essentially operates like eminent domain and it buys property from property owners at a fair market price, and then creates a program for lower income people to be able to become homeowners and start building that, generational wealth. And then, the hopeful side effect of that is that people own their properties, they live here, they know their neighbors over a period of time, and that investment, that connection in neighborhoods flourishes, right? And so if we can do that before a big wave of development comes here and just starts putting in high-priced apartments or expensive houses, and it's already happening on the south side, right? I think most
Yeah.
of us are familiar with developments such as the Wheeler District that really represent that. Let's just put in a massive amount of private investment that doesn't consider the surrounding areas and essentially develops an enclave and a bubble of existence adjacent to things like public housing or a large swath of rental properties where people of lower incomes are living, and they're excluded from the new benefits brought on by this investment. So it's really just figuring out the way those programs can work and putting the public investment into that. And part of that is, zoning. If we ensure that, anytime a developer comes to the city with a project and they say, hey, I want to buy this plot of land, or I bought this plot of land in this inner city area and I want to build an apartment building there. Okay, cool. That's great that you want to invest there. Let's have some types of requirements or incentives to these property owners where, a certain percentage of those units are going to be affordable housing, right? Where people who have been living in that area, maybe they can't afford, they aren't on the path to own a home in the near future, but they can rent in that place and they can maintain their connections to their neighborhoods or build those connections anew and stay in that area where they've developed familiarity.
All right. You also have a part about civic engagement on your platform. What are some ways you think we could increase public involvement in Oklahoma City, more specifically in Ward 4?
I think a lot of it can happen through accurate representation. I'm half Mexican, and a large part of Ward 4 has Latino roots. I'm not saying all of us, and I'm not saying that's the only population I would be paying attention to, but I think when we look at our Latino community, there hasn't been a big wave of civic engagement. There's a lot of people starting to make those waves now, right? A lot of people are getting engaged, and we're starting to see people elected from our communities or involved in our communities and starting to represent our communities, right? We have recent, electoral wins of Jose Cruz in House District 89, and before that, the Senate race that in 2017 that Michael Brooks Jimenez won, right? So these are people who've worked in our communities and developed these relationships, or they've grown up here and are starting to represent us, right? And that's something we haven't had the majority of the time that, the Latino Southside community has developed and grown up in the city. So I think if we can show these people that, hey, the kids of the parents who immigrated here are starting to get involved, and they want to make sure that our neighborhoods are safer, have more opportunity, and are becoming more attractive for your kids to stay here. And they want to do good within this community. And it's not just about, we have Spanish sounding last names, or my skin has a little bit more melanin, right? And it looks more like the Latino population that lives here. It's about participation and getting those people involved in the process, right? So when I'm out there knocking doors, I'm talking to people about what they're interested in, what they see as issues within their communities. And that's giving them that participation that they may not have had or felt before. And then when I'm sharing them my visions and my ideas and my thoughts, my observations, like I've been sharing with you about, housing issues within our community, right? That's a connection that I think people who aren't from our communities or haven't experienced life in our communities miss a lot of the time, right? It's not just about economic development. It's about community level connections, neighborhood level connections.
All right. And you also talk about community building. You talk about making more neighborhood associations or working with current ones. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Like I said, I think it really boils down to getting involved at the local level. And if we can empower, even if it's just one block of the city, to collect their voices, to overcome whatever issues they may have as neighbors, neighborly disputes, and find, common ground. Say it's addressing a speed limit issue or a school zone issue or a crosswalk issue or something like that. If we can empower people at the local level and then show them that they have that agency, that they're able to create change within their community that makes their lives better, safer, more comfortable, um, then that's what sparks this stronger neighborhoods. And there's some great efforts out there already, and I want to give credit to those. The Strong Neighborhoods Initiative um, is a program that has really been putting in this work in the inner city and in a lot of neighborhoods that haven't been getting much attention, like Capitol View on the northeast side and Capitol Hill on the south side, where I live, have recently been the recipients of grants and a bit of attention, particularly from the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative, to include things like the mobile market, which is a partnership between Oklahoma City County Health Department, Strong Neighborhoods Initiative, St. Luke's Methodist Church, and the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma, right? So they realize that there's need in these communities, these neighborhoods, and they all come together and pool their resources and their connections, and they do something good like provide fruit and produce on a monthly basis to anyone who wants to come by. And then they have a new program coming out called Neighborhood Connections, which I'm really excited about. It's essentially, it lines up with kind of the praxis of my campaign, which is going out and talking with people in a canvassing manner and essentially developing a network of mutual aid, right? What are the needs in the community? What are the resources that people have in the community, and how can we, connect those dots? So that's something I'm really excited about, and I hope to work with in the future as a private citizen or as a council member.
All right. And the last question I have here is, what kind of music do you listen to?
Well, I'm in law school right now, right? So lately it's been those lo-fi chill beats to study to. But I have a really eclectic taste in music. I grew up in a Mexican household, so I was raised on cumbia, right? Like Selena and Los Angeles Azules and some of the old school hits from like the 80s and 90s, like Los Bukis and Los Temerarios, right? And then in middle school, I noticed on the bio for the Green Corn Rebellion, it says talking about politics and metal music, right? So in middle school and high school, when I went to the school on the north side and exposed to a bit of different culture, I was in a screamo band, right? So very much, and then goes along with the whole like, rebellious teen, angry teen, or angsty teen, I guess, and listening to things that probably align a little bit more with the stuff that you talk about in here, right? I was listening to Power Man 5000 and
Oh
Godsmack
yeah.
back
Okay,
in
cool.
middle school and stuff, right? And that that really opened up my mind to different things and the friends I made at that time. So I've been a participant in the hardcore music scene since I was a teenager. A lot less so these days, but I can still get down with some sludgy metal, some sleep, um, cough, things like that. But I think when I'm the happiest is when I've got music playing that's I can dance to, right? So that's something that I think, it's something I've noticed I've been missing a lot since the pandemic started, is going out and dancing and being in a
Yeah.
crowd of sweaty people, just like getting your boogie on.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. Where can we find you on social media, and what's your campaign website?
Campaign website is swg4okc.com. And if you type that into Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you should be able to find it too. SWG for OKC.
All right. Thanks for coming on, and good luck to you on the campaign trail.
Thanks a lot. You have a good rest of your show.
All right.